So, Aaron, you want to do a review of this past year and looking a little bit
Sure,
into
why
the
not?
new
I'm
year?
going to inundate everybody with a bunch of charts. What do you
Oh,
guys think
thrilling.
about that?
Do it.
Yeah,
Do we
just
have to read
give
any of them?
me. No, I'm just going to walk you through. It's going to be quick, but I just figured, we're at the start of 2023. Why not just take a look at the market performance over the past year?
Yeah, and
Kind
for
of
the
look at some
people
of
on the
the best
podcast,
top
Aaron
performing
will
sectors.
explain them. Eric will explain these charts that he's got on there, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's you could
No.
easily follow along just by the explanation. It's not a big deal. But anyway, so I just want to take a look. Home country index, the TSX index. How did it do in 2022? So overall, the TSX index was down 8.5% for the year. So not a great performance, obviously. But when we compare this to the U.S., it actually does look pretty good. So looking at the S&P 500, down 19.4%, so almost 20% for 2022. And why is this significant? Well, this is significant because I think this is the first time in 10 years that the Canadian index has outperformed the US index. And I could be wrong. Maybe there's 1 year in the past decade where it's outperformed, but generally we've been a perpetual underperformer relative to the US. Now, of course, our 1 year of outperformance doesn't actually mean we generate positive returns for the TSX, but this is still a deviation from what we've seen over the past decade. And one of the reasons why this has been the case, and this is a systemic issue with the Canadian market, is that we are highly concentrated up here in Canada. Resources, banks, or financials, those two sectors alone generally account for about half of our stock market. And in the financial sector, most of that are the big six banks, right? But very highly levered to oil and gas, which has not performed well for most of the last decade, but did perform well over the last year. Whereas the US, highly levered towards technology, which has performed very well over the last decade, but not over the last year. Now, the S&P 500, that's a wide mix of companies. But if you want to look at the NASDAQ in the US, this is the tech-heavy index. This is where most of the tech companies are located, is in the NASDAQ. NASDAQ was down 33% for 2022. So that is an absolutely horrid performance. And that comes down to major underperformance, primarily from the technology sector. Now, 33% doesn't even really tell the full story. We've talked about some individual companies, some of the companies that were the top performing names over the previous couple of years, like the Zooms, the DocuSigns, really strong pandemic stories. A lot of the high growth, mid cap, SaaS stock, software as a service software companies. Many of those names are down 70, 80, 90+% in 2022. So it had been a absolutely disastrous year for the technology sector in the US. Now, let's talk about some top performers. Well, of course, energy has been the main focus in the past year here. And because it's essentially energy is the reason why the performance of the TSX was not worse than the 8.5%. It really boosted it. So TSX Energy Index was up 31% in 2022. Absolutely great performance there. Whereas the technology sector in Canada was down 29%, right? So this is Canadian technology down 29%. Now, the top technology company in Canada, being Shopify, was down much more than that. I don't know, Brett, if you want to pull up the 2022 decline for Shopify, just so we could have it at some point in the conversation here. I don't have it handy, but Shopify was at one point, I believe, the largest stock by market cap in the Canadian market. I think it was about half or more of the entire technology sector. And this goes once again to the high concentration that the Canadian market has on a number of different levels. But Shopify's performance, while I don't have the specific number, was absolutely horrid.
Minus 67% over the year.
Minus 67% for the year. And, this was, I believe, the largest company by market cap in Canada at one point, bigger than even the big banks, and essentially dominating the Canadian technology space. But technology actually was not the worst performing sector in Canada. Surprisingly, I thought it would be. It was actually the healthcare sector, the healthcare index, down 56% in Canada in 2022. Now, I think that, the Canadian healthcare sector, or the index rather, it's a bit of a strange index because we don't have a lot of, what you would consider to be traditional, conventional healthcare companies in Canada that are publicly traded like they do in the US for a variety of reasons. So the healthcare sector overall, or index overall, is very small relative to other sectors in Canada. And in addition, our cannabis stocks are also considered healthcare companies for the purpose of the index. So this index does include Canadian cannabis companies. Personally, I don't understand why they would be in healthcare. Most of them are selling primarily into the recreational cannabis market, which to me is a consumer product. It's not a healthcare product. If they're medicinal, I can understand healthcare. But anyways, down 56% in 2022. And then a look at the U.S. Technology Index. So this is the S&P Information Technology Index. So down 56% in. Sorry, that is wrong. I have a wrong number there. So can you just work the number for me here, Brett? It ended the year at 2139 and started at about 3100. Can you work that percentage for me? Yeah, sorry, 56%. That was from the previous slide, but still a major decline
down 31%.
here. Yeah, we're looking at about 31% decline, U.S. Technology Index. Sorry about that. And then I felt as well. I mean, these numbers that I've shown you, they really cover the entire year. But I also felt that maybe it'd be a good idea if we looked at just what sectors had the most momentum coming out of 2022. Because a lot of people will make the presumption that if a sector had really great performance across the year, that meant that it performed well in the latter part of the year, and maybe it has good momentum going into 2023. Not really the case. If we take the top performing sector, energy in Canada, performance over the last 6 weeks of the year, the sector was down. The index was down 12%. So that great performance that we saw throughout the year did not translate into strong momentum going out towards the end of the year. Now, 6 weeks, that's a fairly arbitrary number, but essentially what it just shows is that the sector was the momentum really died down towards the very end. And then if we look at one of the worst areas of the market, so the NASDAQ 2022, last 6 weeks, still not great, but not as bad. So down 8.5%. So a little bit better performance than energy coming out of the year. Now, what does this mean? Well, it doesn't really mean anything. This is just informational. But I'm sure a lot of people are wondering now, okay, 2022, that's in the rear view. What are we looking at for 2023? Can we still expect technology to underperform? Can we still expect energy to outperform? Well, I would be cautious on an expectation that energy will continue to outperform in 2023. Now, this is not a prediction. It's just a concern. So if we were to look, for example, at crude oil prices, this is like a 1 year chart. We're basically ending the year roughly where we began, at about $78 per barrel of WTI. That's down from a peak of $115 to $120 per barrel. So in the last half of the year, really, the momentum on commodity prices, energy commodity prices, was not very strong. And the same statement can be made for natural gas as well. Really volatile throughout the year, basically ending the year where it began, about $3.94 for natural gas. And that's down from about $9.50 at the very peak in September. So the last several months, weak momentum for natural gas. Now, these commodities are also very seasonal. I'm not adjusting for seasonality. That needs to be considered too, but it's just something to consider when we are looking at which sectors are going to outperform in 2023. Rather than trying to make a guess at which sector is going to outperform, we have our own strategies for picking winners, and that's to be more or less sector agnostic. Look at the individual companies and build that portfolio that has a mix of different types of companies in strong growth areas. So, technology is going to be one of those areas, but we've seen what happens when you completely lever your portfolio to technology. So it's an important part of the portfolio. It's not all the portfolio. Some people are going to want to have commodity exposure in there as well, energy, natural gas. But given the volatility in that space, we suggest that exposure is controlled and moderated, and you're not overexposed to highly cyclical sectors.
Totally.
Excellent. Oh, and just another comment just on energy as well. Just given that it got so much press this year, over the past year for the great performance, when we look at how energy has performed over the last 10 years, it's really almost negligible return. I mean, a lot of volatility, but it ended a great year in 2022, roughly where it was at the end of 2012, with a lot of volatility in between. And if we didn't have this last bull run, previous to this year, it was almost straight down. So that just illustrates how volatile the space can be. Again, having some exposure to it, good idea. Having too much exposure to it can be disastrous. Excellent.
Perfect. Yeah, like I'd like to say,
yeah, I
just,
mean,
just on,
yeah.
Go
what do
ahead,
you want
Ryan.
to go? Well, just on the energy and what? Okay,
let
go.
Brennan
go,
talk
Brennan.
because he started first.
Well, no,
Yeah,
it's
Brennan.
just Ryan and myself talked about this yesterday. We literally had this conversation saying, we're seeing oil back to, levels which were at the beginning of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
They went, they were elevated throughout 2022. Going into 2023, if oil just remains in the exact same position that it's going to be, these companies are going to have difficult comparables to report against. So, revenue is likely going to go down, and earnings are likely going to go down unless they can increase production. So, going into 2023, if we continue to see oil in this range, there's going to be tough comparables and some tough financials to post against. Maybe not as much growth or maybe no growth that like we saw in 2022. But anyways, sorry, Ryan, I cut you off twice.
Yeah, I would just, over the last several weeks and even during the course of the ending part of 2022, we've had a number of clients and potential clients reach out and say, should I be in energy? I should be all over energy. It did well last year. And like chasing a sector like that is often a fool's game. And, we just saw those charts, like many of those companies, unless we see seasonal jump ups in the price, like natural gas is down over 50% in the past, over the last half of this year. And it's dropped precipitously just in the last month. So you're going to compare those numbers. If natural gas stays in its current range, which is one of the possibilities, if it goes lower, if it does two of those things, the year over year results will be very poor relative to where they were last year. If it goes up, it has to go up significantly again. It can start to compare or maybe start to be above. So that's one scenario. Only if you have a significant increase from where you are in either oil and natural gas with a commensurate either equal production or higher production, that's when you will get better results, which will drive the stock higher. But you're, in two scenarios, essentially flat or going down, you're going to see significantly lower results in these companies year over year, which, we don't know which way it's going to go. That doesn't sound like the greatest bet to me. And you are just betting on the price of energy. And if you look back at energy, like Aaron said, over 10 years, those stocks are actually lower than they were at this time 10 years ago. So, if you look at, if Aaron had the information technology, he's put that up before, that sector, despite the losses that we saw there over the past year, it's up significantly after the past 20 years, for example. So even after the losses we saw over the past year. The last thing I'd say, can you guys tell me the index in North America that actually underperformed all of those indexes that Aaron put up? Can anybody tell me that?
Venture.
There you go. The TSX Venture down 39% over the past year. A very impressive performance for that index once again. Maybe I can get in a fight with the CEO of that index once again, as I did after a speech on that exchange a few years ago, just prior to COVID. So maybe we'll tweet that out there with the performance of that index over the past year. When commodities, which, there's a lot of junior commodity-based businesses on there, did relatively well, at least for part of the year, it had a very poor year. Okay.
Just on your comments on the NASDAQ there, so technology index. So, you're looking at about 250% return over that period of time.
Yeah.
From the NASDAQ.
Tremendous, right?
Index. And that includes the big drop that they had over the last year, right?
As opposed to you putting your money to work in energy, for example, over that period, a negative return, right? So 1 year does not a sector make or an investment philosophy make. I wouldn't base your investment philosophy on what a segment of the market did in 1 year.